Blizzards, sub-zero nights, months of darkness, conditions that killed experienced explorers. Yet Native American babies survived these winters in animal skin tents. The secret wasn't just the fire. When your central heating breaks down in winter, you call a repair guy and complain about being cold for a few hours. Native American families, they had to survive months of brutal winters in portable shelters that could literally mean the difference between life and death. Talk about pressure. The teepee wasn't just some tent their ancestors threw together on a weekend. This was engineering brilliance wrapped in buffalo hide. Every single detail had a purpose, and that purpose was keeping families breathing through winters that could freeze your eyelashes off. Here's what blows my mind. The conical shape wasn't chosen because it looked cool around the campfire. Wind hits a teepee and slides right around it, like water off a duck's back. Compare that to a square cabin, where wind slams into flat walls and rattles everything inside. The tipi just shrugs and lets the wind keep moving. But here's where it gets really clever. These weren't permanent structures bolted to the ground. A skilled family could tear down their entire home and pack it up in under 20 minutes. 20 minutes. My neighbor takes longer than that to fold his lawn chairs. When a blizzard was coming or food was running low, mobility meant survival. No mortgage payments, no property taxes. Just grab your stuff and move to where life was easier. The temperature difference inside a properly set up teepee compared to outside air? Studies show it could be 10 to 15 degrees warmer. That might not sound like much until you realize it's the difference between surviving at 20 below zero versus dying at 35 below. What really gets me is how this knowledge passed from grandmothers to mothers to daughters for centuries. No YouTube tutorials or instruction manuals, just hands-on experience and the kind of wisdom you only get when your life depends on getting it right. One mistake setting up your family's shelter and winter would remind you real quick. The crazy part? Modern camping gear companies spend millions trying to design tents that do half of what a teepee accomplished with nothing but natural materials and inherited knowledge. We've got synthetic fabrics, aluminum poles, and computer-designed ventilation systems. Yet these structures from centuries ago could still teach us a thing or two about staying warm. Think about the last time you went camping and spent 30 minutes fighting with tent poles while cursing the instruction manual. Meanwhile, Native American families were setting up homes that would keep them alive through months of weather that would send most of us running for the nearest heated hotel lobby. Well, the brilliant design was just the beginning. What they wrapped around that frame to keep the deadly cold at bay. That's where things get really interesting. When your grandmother complains about her winter heating bills, she's basically experiencing what Native American families faced every single day during brutal winter months. Except they didn't have the luxury of calling a repair guy when their heating system failed. The secret weapon? Animal hides that worked better than most modern insulation materials. Buffalo hides were the gold standard of winter survival gear. Think of them as nature's equivalent to those fancy down jackets that cost $300 at outdoor stores, except these actually kept entire families alive in temperatures that would make a polar bear shiver. These weren't just any random animal skins thrown over a frame like some prehistoric camping trip gone wrong. The preparation process was more complex than assembling IKEA furniture, and thankfully came with better instructions passed down through generations. Women would spend weeks treating these hides, removing every trace of fat and flesh, then working them until they became supple yet incredibly durable. The result was a material that could flex with fierce winds without tearing, while maintaining its insulating properties for years. But here's where it gets really clever. Native Americans didn't just slap one hide on their teepee and call it a day. They layered these hides like a master chef layers flavors in a perfect dish. The outer layer faced the brutal elements, while inner layers created air pockets that trapped warm air more effectively than modern thermal underwear. During the harshest months, families would add what they called a dew cloth, or inner lining. This created a double wall system that would make today's tent manufacturers weep with envy. The airspace between the outer hide and inner lining acted like a thermal barrier, similar to how your thermos keeps coffee hot for hours. Well, the science behind this is actually fascinating. These layered hides could maintain interior temperatures 15 to 20 degrees warmer than the outside air. That's the difference between life and death when you're dealing with sub-zero temperatures that last for months. The hides also had another trick up their metaphorical sleeve. They were naturally water-resistant when properly treated, yet breathable enough to prevent dangerous condensation buildup inside. Modern synthetic materials still struggle to achieve this perfect balance between waterproofing and breathability. Different tribes had their own techniques for maximizing insulation efficiency. Some would use elk hides for their superior thickness, while others preferred deer hides for their lighter weight and flexibility. The Lakota were particularly famous for their buffalo hide teepees that could withstand prairie winds strong enough to knock over horses. Then there's the remarkable durability factor. These hides could last through multiple harsh winters with proper maintenance, something that would impress even today's outdoor gear enthusiasts who baby their expensive equipment. But even the best insulation means nothing without proper air circulation, which brings us to one of the most ingenious aspects of tipi design. Now here's where things get really clever, and I mean NASA-level engineering hidden in what looks like a simple tent flap. That adjustable opening at the top of a teepee? It wasn't just some afterthought, it was a precision ventilation system that would make modern HVAC engineers jealous. These flaps could be moved and adjusted faster than my neighbor Bob trying to find the perfect thermostat setting, and way more effectively too. The genius lay in how these smoke flaps work together. Two overlapping flaps at the peak created what engineers today call a Venturi effect. When positioned correctly, they actually pulled smoke up and out while preventing cold air from rushing in. Think of it like a natural chimney that never needed cleaning. But here's the kicker. The whole system was adjustable based on wind direction and weather conditions. Families could fine-tune their ventilation by simply moving the wooden poles that controlled the flaps. Wind coming from the east? Adjust accordingly. Storm brewing? Close it down tight. It was like having a smart home system, except it actually worked without constantly needing updates. Research conducted by modern survival experts found that a properly managed tipi ventilation system could reduce interior smoke by over 50% compared to a sealed shelter with just a basic opening. That's not just comfort. That's life and death when you're burning fuel for months on end during brutal winters. The positioning wasn't random either. Native American families knew exactly how to orient their teepees so the prevailing winds would help draw smoke up and out. They'd study wind patterns like meteorologists, understanding that proper airflow meant the difference between a cozy home and a smoke-filled nightmare. Then there's the temperature regulation aspect that really blows my mind. By adjusting these flaps, families could control not just smoke, but heat retention too. Crack them open slightly on a warmer day, seal them tight when the temperature dropped. It was more responsive than my fancy programmable thermostat, and it never broke down. The whole system worked because of principles we didn't formally understand until centuries later. The conical shape created natural air currents, the flaps controlled the exit point, and the central fire provided the heat source that drove the entire circulation system. Everything worked together like a perfectly tuned engine. What really gets me is how this knowledge was passed down through generations without engineering degrees or computer models. Families learned through experience, observation, and probably a few smoky mistakes along the way. And speaking of mistakes, imagine trying to sleep in a poorly ventilated teepee during a blizzard. You'd wake up either frozen solid or gasping for clean air, if you woke up at all. But even the most brilliant ventilation system needs the right fuel to work properly. The type of wood, how it was prepared, and where the fire was positioned all played crucial roles in keeping families alive through those deadly winters. Now let's talk about the genius of Native American central heating. And no, they didn't have a guy named Dave coming over to fix the furnace. Right smack dab in the middle of every teepee sat a carefully constructed fire pit. This wasn't just some random hole in the ground where they tossed a few logs. These folks understood heat distribution better than most modern homeowners understand their thermostats. The placement was pure engineering brilliance. By positioning the fire dead center, heat radiated outward in all directions equally. Think of it like a campfire that actually makes sense, instead of everyone fighting for the warm side while freezing their backsides off on the other. But here's where it gets really clever. The fire pit was typically lined with stones that absorbed heat during the day and slowly released it throughout the night. These rocks became natural heat batteries, storing warmth when the fire burned bright and giving it back when the flames died down. Pretty smart for people who supposedly didn't have technology, right? The fuel selection wasn't random either. Different woods burned at different temperatures and produced varying amounts of smoke. Hardwoods like oak burned hot and long, perfect for those brutal winter nights when nobody wanted to venture outside for more fuel. Softer woods caught quickly for fast heat when someone stumbled out of their buffalo robes on a frigid morning. Well, the really fascinating part is how they managed smoke. Too much smoke and you're basically living in a chimney. Too little airflow and the fire dies, leaving everyone colder than a mother-in-law's goodbye kiss. The fire had to work in perfect harmony with those adjustable smoke flaps at the top. Families would gather around this central hearth like moths to a flame. Literally. Children did homework by firelight, adults shared stories, and everyone stayed warm enough to survive another day. The fire served triple duty. Heating, cooking, and lighting all rolled into one efficient system. During the worst winter storms, when temperatures dropped low enough to freeze spit before it hit the ground, this central fire could keep the interior of a teepee a comfortable 60 to 70 degrees. That's a temperature difference of sometimes 50 degrees or more from outside to inside. The fire pit also created natural air circulation. Warm air rose toward the smoke hole, drawing fresh, cold air in from the bottom edges of the teepee. This constant, gentle circulation prevented the stuffiness that would make a sealed shelter unbearable. And here's something that might surprise you. These central fires rarely went out, completely during winter months. Families took turns maintaining the coals, ensuring continuous warmth throughout the coldest seasons. But keeping that fire burning safely required more than just good intentions and dry wood. Ever wonder why your grandmother always insisted on throwing an extra rug on the floor during winter visits? Well, she might have learned a thing or two from Native American ingenuity, even if she didn't know it. The ground beneath a teepee wasn't just cold, it was a heat-stealing monster that could suck the life right out of a family. When temperatures plummeted to 20 or 30 degrees below zero, that frozen earth turned into nature's own refrigerator coil, constantly drawing warmth downward. But here's where Native American families got really clever. They created what I like to call the original heated mattress system. Multiple layers of carefully prepared materials covered every inch of the teepee floor. Buffalo hides formed the foundation, thick, dense, and naturally water-resistant. Then came woven grass mats, adding both cushioning and an extra barrier against the cold. Makes sense, right? But wait, it gets better. On top of these base layers went softer deer hides and elk skins, creating what was essentially a natural memory foam experience. These weren't just randomly thrown down either. Each layer served a specific purpose, much like those fancy sleep systems you see advertised for 3 easy payments of $19.99. The science behind this layered approach would make modern engineers jealous. Air pockets formed between the different materials, creating natural insulation that could reduce heat loss by up to 15%. That might not sound like much, but when you're fighting for survival in a Dakota blizzard, every degree matters. Then there's the genius part most people miss. These ground coverings weren't permanent installations. Families could adjust them based on conditions, adding more layers when storms hit or removing some during milder spells. It's like having a thermostat for your floor. Pretty sophisticated for people who supposedly lived primitively. The really smart families even created raised sleeping areas using extra bundles of grass or small wooden platforms. This lifted them further from the ground's icy grip, similar to how your fancy adjustable bed works today, except theirs didn't come with a remote control or monthly payments. What strikes me most about this system is how it solved multiple problems at once. Comfort, check. Insulation, double check. Easy maintenance and adjustment, triple check. These weren't just survival tactics, they were comfort innovations that would make modern camping gear companies weep with envy. The proof is in the pudding, as they say. Archaeological evidence shows families using these layered floor systems survived winters that would challenge even today's well-equipped outdoor enthusiasts. But keeping the floor warm was only part of the equation. Even the most comfortable ground covering wouldn't matter if the whole teepee was positioned wrong, facing directly into howling winter winds. You know how realtors always say, location, location, location? Well, turns out Native Americans were the original real estate experts, except their lives literally depended on getting it right. Setting up a teepee wasn't just about finding a flat spot and calling it home. These families had to think like meteorologists, architects, and survival experts all rolled into one. The difference between a smart placement and a foolish one could mean the difference between a cozy winter and becoming human popsicles. Wind direction was enemy number one. Picture this. You're facing brutal winter gusts that could knock a grown man sideways, and your home is basically a fancy tent. But here's where it gets clever. Experienced families would study wind patterns like they were reading tomorrow's newspaper. They'd position their teepees so the entrance faced away from prevailing winds, creating a natural shield against those bone-chilling blasts. Then there's the genius of using Mother Nature as a construction crew. Hills became instant windbreaks, and dense tree lines turned into living fortress walls. Smart placement near these natural barriers could reduce wind exposure by up to 70%. That's like having a built-in heating system without burning an extra stick of wood. But wait, there's more to this strategic thinking. These weren't just random camping spots. Families would scout for areas with natural drainage to avoid turning their homes into winter swimming pools when snow melted. They'd look for slightly elevated ground that wouldn't collect freezing water but wasn't so high that they'd catch every angry wind gust. Archaeological digs have revealed something fascinating about winter camp locations. These sites weren't chosen willy-nilly like throwing darts at a map. Families consistently picked spots near reliable water sources, sheltered valleys, and areas where game animals naturally gathered. It's like they had GPS coordinates for survival passed down through generations of trial and very cold error. The really smart part? They'd often set up multiple tippies in clusters with the whole village working together like a giant wind-blocking puzzle. Each family's tipi placement supported the others, creating microclimates that were significantly warmer than the surrounding wilderness. Think of it as the world's first planned community. Except instead of homeowner associations, they had survival instincts. Some families would even use temporary windbreaks made from brush and snow, building up additional barriers on the windward side of their teepees. It's like adding a front porch, but one that could save your life when temperatures drop to deadly levels. This wasn't luck or guesswork. It was sophisticated environmental engineering disguised as simple camping. Makes sense, right? When winter could kill you in hours, you'd better know where to park your house. But even the perfect location meant nothing without the right seasonal adjustments to make these shelters truly winterproof. Native American families didn't just build their teepees once and call it good. Oh no, that would be like wearing the same outfit year-round and expecting to survive both beach weather and blizzards. These folks were masters of seasonal adaptation, constantly tweaking their shelters like a handyman who never stops improving his workshop. When autumn rolled around, families would start swapping out their lighter summer buffalo hides for the thick, woolly winter coats. Think of it as changing from a cotton t-shirt to a down jacket, except your jacket was also your entire house. The winter hides were often double-layered, creating an insulation system that would make modern contractors jealous. Some teepees used up to 18 buffalo hides during the coldest months. That's enough leather to make a motorcycle gang weep with envy. But here's where it gets really clever. They'd add what I like to call a teepee sweater, an inner lining called a dew cloth that hung about 6 feet up from the ground. This created a double wall system, trapping warm air between the layers like a thermos bottle. The rising warm air would circulate down between the walls, creating a natural convection current that heated the entire space. Well, the seasonal prep work was no joke either. Families would spend weeks in late summer gathering extra firewood, selecting the best hides, and even collecting specific grasses and mosses to stuff into gaps. It was like preparing for the world's longest camping trip, except failure meant freezing to death instead of just being uncomfortable. And the weird part is how they'd adjust the teepee's personality for different seasons. Summer teepees stood tall and proud, catching every breeze. Winter teepees were battened down like a submarine preparing to dive, with the bottom edges weighted with stones and extra stakes driven deep into frozen ground. The smoke flap adjustments alone were an art form. Winter positioning was completely different from summer settings. They'd angle the flaps to create a draft that pulled smoke up and out while preventing cold air from rushing in. Makes sense, right? It's like having a chimney that actually listens to instructions. Then there's the interior seasonal shuffle. Winter floors got extra layers of thick buffalo robes, sometimes 3 or 4 deep. The walls would be lined with personal belongings and stored food, creating additional insulation while keeping everything accessible. Smart families would even hang clothes and blankets from the teepee poles, adding another layer of warmth. These seasonal adaptations weren't just about survival, they were about thriving in conditions that would send most of us running for the nearest heated hotel. Every adjustment was tested by generations of families who literally bet their lives on getting it right. The question is, how did they manage to stay warm when the real killer cold hit and temperatures dropped so low that even their breath could freeze?